Nothing was out of the ordinary. And the next thing I know, we began to shudder, and it started to slip, and then it fell over, and other passengers fell on top of it.
It was just like a second or two. Like, it just felt like we were going like noticeably faster and way to the side. It was just kind of like, whoa, that's weird. And then everything just went sideways.
What was the problem with Sunday's deadly Metro North rail crash in New York? Well, maybe the brakes weren't applied. That's one of the latest theories, and we'll have the details right here, right now on the News Hub. Good morning and welcome. I'm Simon Constable, and we've got Wall Street Journal's Greater New York reporter Ted Mann, who's joining us now on the set with the details. You've been covering this, and it's an awful situation. The brakes, were they applied in time? I guess that's one of the big questions.
That's something the investigators are looking at now. This is a train that appears to have been going far too fast when it approached this sharp curve, and that leads them to wonder whether or not the train operator was braking sufficiently before entering the curve where the train actually derailed.
And one of the engineers in your story here, William Rockefeller Jr., the 20-year veteran, couldn't be reached for comment, but he would be involved with the decision on whether to apply the brakes.
He would have had his hand on the throttle and on the brakes, and he's seen as a very good engineer by the people we spoke to, including people in the union, people at the railroad who said he was a veteran. But we did speak to several people familiar with the investigation who said the train was not being slowed as it should have as it approached that curve, and that's increasingly
and it is a curve. I mean, one of the things that Governor Cuomo mentioned yesterday was that it's not the curve because the trains go along the curve every day. Is it the rough equivalent, if speed was the issue, of going around a hairpin bend at 100 miles an hour in a car?
Oh, absolutely.
You might flip.
Absolutely. The speed limit is about 75 miles an hour. It drops to 70 as you start to approach the curve, and then in the curve itself, it goes all the way down to 30 miles an hour. That's the maximum allowable speed for a passenger train.
Now, the locomotive, that is the engine that pushes the carriages or
Right.
pulls the carriages, was actually pushing. It was on the back end. Is that itself dangerous? I know that some people think that it could be because a pulling locomotive is more traditional.
There's some debate about this among train aficionados and some experts. No one we talked to thought that would be the cause of an accident such as this. There's some question about whether having the mass of a locomotive in front of passenger carriages that derail might prevent them from traveling further, but that's really a secondary issue, and it's this is a configuration in which trains are run all the time throughout this entire region, and that's not an area where they're looking at as a cause for the crash.
Now, the National Travel Safety Board were there on the scene immediately. They were setting up meetings yesterday to decide how to proceed. How long will this take? I mean, is there just a tremendous amount of data to filter through?
There's a lot of data to filter through, and obviously what they're doing is very complex reconstruction. Some of these questions will be answered fairly quickly. They've already begun downloading, I believe they've completed downloading the data recorder from the train. That will tell them,
otherwise known as the black box.
The black box, exactly. And that'll tell them when the brakes were applied. The engineer has told some investigators he tried a maneuver called dumping the brakes at the last minute. This is, to use your analogy, this is the equivalent of realizing you're going to go off the road and pulling the emergency brake. Okay. So it's an absolute last-ditch measure. But they'll see if that actually happened, they'll see if that worked as intended, and they'll also try to see if the train was slowing beforehand as it should have been.
Okay, and we know you'll be on the case. Thank you very much, Ted Mann.